6 months in, we review COVID-19 in Canada.
As the situation evolves, so too must our response evolve with it.
The country has been managing to flatten the curve, but there are still challenges ahead.
From a battered economy to calls to end the wildlife trade, COVID-19 has forced change around the world and here at home. Humber News starts now. Hello and welcome to Humber News, coming to you with a virtual newscast from Humber College. I am Anukul Thakur. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Aishwarya Duda. It's Thursday, July 30th, and here's what's making news. It may be hard to believe, but it's been nearly 6 months since Canada went into lockdown to prevent the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Hundreds of businesses, schools, and public spaces have been left empty. But over these past few months, the country has gradually opened up again as citizens adjust to the new normal. Here's a look at where Canada is now and how the country is managing during the pandemic. As of this week, there have been more than 115,000 confirmed cases in Canada, with around 9,000 deaths. More than 100,000 Canadians are reported to have recovered, accounting for over 80% of all cases. While daily reported numbers of the virus had peaked back in May, the country has seen a consistent decline in cases since then. In more recent weeks, multiple areas in Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia, and Alberta have seen a slight increase since mid-July. Public health officials are urging citizens to remain vigilant.
As I have said, the upward trend in this indicator of COVID-19 activity is something that we must keep a very close eye on.
These increases are believed to be a result of the country's economic reopening and more people going out to attend private parties and gatherings. Even with the recent spikes, Canada was recognized by the World Health Organization this week for its work in controlling its outbreaks.
Here in Ontario, some cities have also been experiencing slight increases in their case numbers, especially in the province's capital. Ottawa reported the highest number of new cases in the province earlier this week at 25, with 16 of those cases being in people under 30. This development has made it the new epicenter of the virus in Ontario. As much of the province has moved to stage 3 of reopening, there were more than 200 new cases in a day last week, the highest since June.
This is a worrisome sign. It is different depending on local jurisdiction. But, the fate of the flattening of the curve is still within each of our hands.
But the trend may begin to go down as Ontario reported just over 100 new cases early this week. That number has now gone down even further with just over 70 new cases as of Wednesday. Meanwhile, on the other side of the province, Toronto and Peel region will finally move forward to stage 3 starting July 31st. Now Torontonians will be able to enjoy indoor dining at restaurants, public playgrounds and fitness centers, along with indoor gatherings up to 50 people and outdoor gatherings up to 100 people. Minster Essex remains in stage 2 until further notice.
Our neighbors south of the border are far from flattening the curve, with COVID-19 cases continuing to surge in some states, pushing the total number of recorded cases in the U.S. to a record high of 4 million. With more than 1,000 deaths in the U.S. for a third day in a row, hospitals are overwhelmed in multiple states, including California, Florida, and Texas. On average, the U.S. is now seeing more than 60,000 new cases a day, which translates to roughly 2,600 new cases per hour, the highest rate in the world.
Popular. You know why? Because I recommend it. When I recommend something, they like to say, don't use it.
President Donald Trump has been accused of downplaying COVID-19 and even misleading the public with false treatments. His early dismissals of public health protocols have put him at odds with science and his own medical advisors. But as the numbers climb, the president has recently started advising the public to wear masks.
The president has gone out there and is saying things now that I think important, have to do with wearing masks, staying away from crowded places. So I think that they have been helpful now, and also they've been short and crisp, which I think is good when you're trying to get a message across.
The Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington predicts that the U.S. death toll could rise to 224,000 by November, and that many fatalities could be avoided by wearing masks and social distancing. As the death toll from COVID-19 continues to climb, not only in the US, but across the globe, scientists are working 24/7 on more than 100 vaccine trials at various stages in multiple countries. Anukul, you spoke to the World Health Organization about the progress and potential in the race towards finding a vaccine. What did you learn?
That's right, Aishwarya. I spoke to Margaret Harris with the WHO in Geneva, and I started by asking her an update on the Oxford vaccine trials. You may have read about them. They've been making headlines globally with showing some promising early results.
Oxford vaccine has been doing large trials, and what they've reported recently is that the human safety trials they've done have indicated that there are not significant side effects, and they've also indicated that they are stimulating a reasonable level of antibodies. And they've been able to identify what sort of regimen they would like to try. But they still have to do a very important step, and that's try it out in the real world. That is, give it to people who are exposed to the coronavirus or who are potentially exposed to the coronavirus. So you need to do those trials in places where you've got a lot of transmission going on. And it's that stage that's actually where we will know whether we've got a vaccine that can protect or not. And this is a stage that's very, very tricky. It's quite often difficult to get that evidence. And it means that, yes, they're moving along at a terrific pace, but we haven't got to the stage where we can say that we have a vaccine that we will be ready to use widely yet.
And I understand that normally a vaccine trial takes a decade or more from beginning to end. What do you think has changed with the COVID-19 trials?
You're quite right that most people would say 10 years is really, really, really good. So to be here 6 months into an outbreak with a pathogen we knew nothing about, we've got no experience of, completely new, to be at a stage where we have 21 potential candidates in human trials is unprecedented. I keep using that word, but I can't think of another word. There just isn't an example in human history. But it still takes, the next steps are the slower steps. So people who are thinking there'll be a vaccine by Christmas are wrong. We will be vaccinating ideally if we get a vaccine that is proven to be successful, possibly next year, but we're not looking at and even then, all the public health interventions we know work must be applied. We cannot rely on a vaccine as the only thing that will end this outbreak.
So we can't rely on a vaccine, but with 100 plus trials underway globally now, how hopeful are you?
I am tremendously hopeful because of this incredible scientific goodwill and commitment. The people who are doing this work are not sleeping. They have just been round the clock because they know that they are the people who, their work is the work that's needed to provide one of the most important tools to save the human race from this virus. I said before, there are other things that need to be done. But this work, this commitment, and this sharing of knowledge for me brings enormous hope, because this shows when we work together as humans, we can beat anything.
So Aishwarya, we may be a long way from a vaccine if there is one at all. But according to World Health Organization, the public health protocols we continue to have in place here in Canada are vital in fighting COVID-19.
Thank you, Anu. As countries race to find a working COVID-19 vaccine, a survey shows that many Canadians want it to be made mandatory for all, if and when it's available. Ontario Leger opinion found that 57% of Canadians are in favor of making any viable vaccine compulsory, compared to 51% in the US. The survey sampled just over 1,500 adult Canadians and about 1,000 American adults recently. Leger opinion says a contributing factor to numbers is the trust that Canadians have in the government and how they are handling the pandemic.
Numbers in Canada whether it's at the provincial or federal level, are showing tend to be more trustworthy, welcoming, and respectful of our institutions. A majority of Americans do not trust the current president and his handling of the current crisis.
The survey also found that more Canadians than Americans will be willing to get vaccinated.
As we now know, the wildlife market in Wuhan, China played a big role in the outbreak of COVID-19. The global charity World Animal Protection is calling on the federal government to help ban the global wildlife trade permanently. In an open letter this week, the charity is asking to push for a ban at the G20 summit in November. The trade in wildlife is a multi-billion-dollar global industry, but there are increasing calls that markets like these pose too big a threat to human health and animal welfare and must be shut down.
We knew it was coming. The signs were all there. We knew we had to change, but we didn't.
Organizations like non-profit Freeland, working throughout Asia, are pushing to raise awareness and make change.
It began to bite back. Primates had HIV, civets had SARS, bats and Ebola. COVID-19 is not the first pandemic, and it won't be the last.
We can all play a role in getting to the source of COVID-19 to make sure that this outbreak and others do not hit us again, because the next ones could be even harder. We know the source, wildlife trade. We know the solution, ban wildlife trade.
The World Health Organization says each of the 3 coronaviruses, SARS in Hong Kong, MERS in the Middle East, and now COVID-19, have come from close contact between humans and animals.
So they have certainly arisen because of close contact between humans and animals. And that's a huge area of work where we have to really think about how we live. Are we abusing the animal kingdom? So putting animals in circumstances where they are unhealthy or they are herded together, and where we then come into contact with animals that have had a virus develop within them because of what we have done. So yes, we have to do a lot of work, and we have to think very hard about how we can change so that this does not become a recurring pattern.
While COVID-19 has wreaked havoc on the health of many Canadians, the economy has also been ailing. Businesses have been shutting down, and many have been losing their jobs and are struggling to meet daily living expenses.
Right now, Canadians are hurting because of this pandemic. Everyone has their own story, but it all boils down to a very difficult time for a lot of people.
Canada's unemployment rate has risen to a historic high of over 13%. Such rates have not been seen in almost 4 decades. More than 5 million Canadians, about 1/3 of the country's workforce, have lost their jobs or saw their work hours reduced. Over 1 million jobs were lost just in Ontario.
But these aren't just numbers. These are real people. People who are struggling out there. And it breaks my heart. It keeps me up at night.
In response, the federal government recently announced its financial snapshot, which included a forecasted deficit of $343 billion, more than 10 times last year's deficit.
Our government acted to support the economy. Every investment we made was in response to COVID-19 and was time limited. From income support for Canadians to loans for Canadian businesses and nonprofits of all sizes, we worked to make sure our programs left no one behind.
Canada has not seen this level of spending since World War II. And with the wallop to Canada's economy, it's small businesses across the country that are hurting the most. A new campaign called Canada United is hoping to support local businesses during the pandemic in an effort to boost the economy.
Canada United is a movement to show local businesses some love. Right now, they could use our support more than ever. So we're asking Canadians to buy local and spread the word. And every time you watch our videos or like our posts, we'll contribute 5 cents to small business relief.
Launched by the Royal Bank of Canada, the campaign partners government with dozens of leading brands and the Canadian Chamber of Commerce network. Joining me now is Rocco Rossi, President and CEO of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Rossi, what's the goal of the campaign? What would you say is the core message you're sending out to consumers?
So we want to encourage people to celebrate local, to buy local, to shop local. But it's not just a marketing plan. Every time someone shares a story about where they got their first job, where they went on their first date, where they go to celebrate special occasions, where they go to cut their hair, with hashtag Canada United, RBC and the partners, because we've got over 50 phenomenal, iconic corporate brands, big businesses, will kick in 5 cents into a pool for a small business recovery fund that will let us give $5,000 grants to small businesses to help them pay for PPE and restructuring their offices, their stores, in a way to be safe in the reopening. So it's a win-win-win. It's about shopping, it's about showing the love, and it's also about creating a pool of money to help those businesses reopen even more safely.
What are some of the challenges faced by small businesses during COVID-19? What are the troubles that they're seeing right now?
Well, they are many. I mean, obviously, the first is typically huge revenue losses. Secondly, as they look to reopen after this amount of time, the reopening is not an on-off switch, it's a dimmer switch. And so you still have to put in procedures for social physical distancing, so things can be done safely. And that's additional costs at a time when you've burned through most of your money. There are other issues, particularly for women, whether you're a female entrepreneur or a female employee, very hard to get back into the economy if there isn't a viable daycare solution. And having confusion and problems over the reopening of schools only compounds that problem. There's also been the issue of an enormous digital divide. Those during the crisis who were able to move their business online or who were already adept have done far better than those who have not had that option.
I understand that a lot of small business owners were already going through so much trouble, and COVID has only made it worse. With the little margins that they had, there's barely any left to survive the impact of the pandemic, let alone get back on their feet. Do you think they're having a harder time than bigger businesses in comparison?
For sure, because as you pointed out, they typically don't have the financial capacity, they typically don't have large margins, and they can't make it up in volume. So it's small. And so we know we've already lost thousands of businesses who will not reopen their doors. The longer this goes, the harder the reopening is, and heaven forbid a second wave that slows the reopening further, the more problematic it's going to be for, particularly for small businesses. It's why it's so very, very important that many of these programs that the governments have put in place should also not be on an on-off switch. They need to be tapered to allow to follow what the economy does, because you won't instantly get 100% of your customers back. Your margins are going to be affected by the new costs you have with PPE and safety measures.
Are there any initiatives that the Ontario Chamber of Commerce is taking to help Black or visible minority-owned businesses?
Yeah. We've been working with the Black Chamber of Commerce. We've been working with a variety of associations of different businesses. For instance, the Canada-Pakistan Business Council, the Chinese Business Association. So working very closely with them on advocacy for programs. As well, doing some work with the Black North initiative that West Hall has begun to push for more representation of Blacks and Indigenous in executive suites, in boards, etc. And otherwise, it's, you know, whether you're Black, white, woman, man, if your business's revenue is down 70%, we're trying to help in all of those circumstances. But there's no question that in particular, businesses run by women and racialized minorities are having a harder time of it than other groups.
What do you think the road to recovery looks like? What does Ontario Chamber of Commerce see as a part of recovery for small businesses?
Well, it's going to be slow and hard. There is nothing fair about any of this. And we will continue to lose more businesses the longer this goes. That is an unfortunate reality. It's why we're working hard to ensure that the programs from the government are extended, and also to do everything we can to share best practices.
Mr. Rossi, thank you so much for joining us.
After months of shutdown due to COVID-19, major sports leagues have struggled to find their way safely back to the playing fields with virtual fans. Dozens of international sports events have been postponed or cancelled. Those going ahead are having to grapple with athlete exposure to the virus. The MLB suspended all Miami Marlins games after they confirmed 4 new positive cases this Tuesday after the game with Phillies in Philadelphia. The league said they will allow the Marlins to take care of their players until further notice. They will be resuming the games next Tuesday against the Phillies. The baseball team now has 18 positive cases between players and staff members.
I think most of the owners realize that we built protocols anticipating that we would have positive tests at some point during the season, that the protocols were built in order to allow us to continue to play through those positives. And I think there was support for the notion that we believe that the protocols are adequate to keep our players safe.
The MLB also postponed Phillies games this week as a precautionary measure while awaiting further test results.
From sports south of the border to a world wonder straddling the border, Niagara Falls. Usually a draw for millions of tourists from around the world, but recently images at the falls have drawn headlines for the stark difference they depict of the differing approaches to the pandemic. At the base of the Great Falls, the famous US run Made of the Mist, with passengers in blue, looks full even at half capacity. In stark contrast, on the Canadian run Hornblower, the passengers in red are strictly limited and well spread apart to meet Canada's health protocols. The images capture the difference in approach between the two countries in a snapshot.
I'm glad I live in Canada. I just sent a picture to my friends actually going, the American, you can see why the pandemic is raging in the States and it's not in Canada when you look at the difference between the boats. I think that says a lot about Canada versus the States right now and how we're handling the pandemic.
Well, it's way too crowded. We took a picture of the boat. It's, I don't know, I don't find that it's very safe to be in a boat like that. So it's much better here.
And the numbers in Ontario on one side of the falls and New York State on the other also paint a different picture. The population in New York is 30% larger than Ontario, but the number of COVID cases in the state are 10 times what they are here in the province. With the border remaining closed, Canadian businesses are hoping that homegrown tourists will help make up at least some of the losses. That's all for Humber News today and the last show of our summer semester. Thanks for joining us. I'm Aishwarya Duda.
And I'm Anukul Thakur. Humber News is written and produced by students in the journalism program. For more coverage, visit our website humbernews.ca and follow us on Twitter at HumberJRNL. We'll see you again in the fall.